There I was, standing outside the Gemini Theater, an old, almost decrepit movie house in our town that had seen better days. The neon marquee buzzed faintly, and one of the eyes was perpetually out. Every local knew the story. Once a majestic cinema palace, the theater had faced numerous setbacks over the years, from fires to financial insolvency. But tonight, it held a peculiar attraction for me and a group of eager moviegoers. A poster beside the entrance announced, "Lost Film Screening, 1 night only." Beneath the title, an image of 4 actors, their faces tormented, stared out. They seemed familiar, yet I couldn't place where I'd seen them before. "Ever heard of this one?" I asked the person beside me, a young woman with glasses and a retro 90s style. She shook her head, her gaze fixed on the poster. "But there's something about it, right? Like a memory you can't quite grasp." Inside, the theater was a blend of old-world charm and mildew. Gold-gilded moldings, velvet seats with springs sticking out, and a chandelier that looked like it hadn't been cleaned since the 50s. But the screen, it was enormous. Almost too big for the room. As we settled in, whispers ran through the audience. "It's a lost film, never screened before. Heard the actors died under mysterious circumstances. My friend said it's cursed." The theater went dark. A hush fell. Crackling. The unmistakable sound of an old film reel starting. Black and white images flickered onto the screen. A title card appeared. "Doppelganger's Reverie." Oddly enough, there was no audio, just subtitles and a soft, haunting piano score that played in the background. The movie's plot was simple, even cliché. 4 friends visited a cursed mansion, only to be confronted by their doppelgangers. As the storyline progressed, the real and mirrored worlds began to blur. Characters would speak, but their reflections wouldn't. Or vice versa. It was disorienting and yet mesmerizing. Then, halfway through, something bizarre happened. The film shifted, revealing behind-the-scenes footage. The actors, still in character, laughed and chatted. A man with a clipboard shouted directions. But as this, raw, footage continued, the atmosphere grew tenser. The actors began arguing, their laughter turning to shouts. One of them, a tall man with dark hair, suddenly clutched his chest and fell. Panic ensued on screen. The others tried to help, but one by one, they started collapsing too. The piano music crescendoed into an unsettling harmony. Thud. The projector went off, plunging us into darkness. "What the hell was that?" someone whispered. A spotlight beamed down, revealing the theater's old manager, Mr. Hughes, on the stage. He looked pale, his hands trembling. "This film was never meant to be seen," he began. "It's a relic from a time best forgotten. But someone sent it to me, saying it was a piece of our town's history. The actors in that film? All locals. And after that shoot, they never returned." Whispers erupted in the audience. "Why would you show it then?" someone yelled. "I thought it was a prank," Hughes replied, voice cracking. "I had no idea." The girl with the glasses stood up. "I remember now. My grandma had a photo of these actors. Said they were her friends. They disappeared after going to a film shoot. No one knew why." Another person piped up. "My grandpa was a cop back then. Said they investigated but found nothing. No bodies, no evidence. Suddenly, the screen flickered back to life. The scene showed the movie theater. This very theater. The camera moved through the aisles, getting closer and closer to the audience on screen. And as it did, the image became clearer. We were looking at ourselves. Screams echoed. The exits seemed to vanish in the darkness. The chilling piano score from the movie continued to play, sending shivers down our spines. The impossible scene on the screen continued its merciless advance, a black and white rendition of our reactions. I saw myself frozen in terror, the girl with glasses covering her mouth in horror, Mr. Hughes on the stage, eyes wide in disbelief. The camera's perspective moved closer and closer, up the aisle. I glanced around, trying to find the source of this new footage. No cameras, no crew. Nothing. Just the old projector upstairs casting our fate. Suddenly, the footage changed. It showed the theater's lobby. On screen, we watched as our black and white doppelgangers entered the theater, their expressions eerily mimicking our own from earlier that evening. The camera lingered on their faces, showing every nuance of their initial excitement and intrigue. And then, one by one, their faces began to twist into expressions of sheer terror. The theater's back doors slammed open, drawing our attention away from the screen. 4 figures stood silhouetted against the dim light of the lobby, their postures eerily similar to the actors from the movie. A guttural whisper broke the suffocating silence. "Join us." The doppelgangers advanced, and the audience scattered in all directions, knocking over chairs and clambering over each other in a desperate attempt to flee. But every exit seemed sealed, every pathway blocked. I grabbed the girl's hand. "The projection room!" I shouted. "Maybe we can shut it off." We raced up the stairs, pursued by the haunting piano score and the spectral cries of the doppelgangers. The narrow hallway leading to the projection room seemed endless, dimly lit by sputtering bulbs. Reaching the room, we found it abandoned, the ancient projector still whirring and clicking. I approached cautiously, every instinct telling me to shut it off. But then I looked at the reel. It was unlike any film reel I'd seen. Instead of celluloid, it looked organic, pulsing, alive. The frames showed scenes that hadn't yet occurred, including one of me reaching for the reel. "Stop!" the girl cried. "Look!" She pointed at the next sequence on the reel. It showed the two of us, entrapped in the film, our faces contorted in fear, just like the actors. Suddenly, the door slammed shut. We turned to see the dark-haired actor, the one who had first collapsed in the behind-the-scenes footage. His eyes were blank, soulless. You can't escape the film," he murmured. "We tried. Now it's your turn." Desperation took hold. I lunged at the projector, attempting to rip the reel away. But the moment I touched it, a searing pain shot through me, and the world began to blur and distort. Vision swirling, I found myself no longer in the projection room but within a dimly lit, grainy world. The surroundings felt familiar yet distorted. It was the theater, but not as I knew it. The ever-present piano score was more haunting here, echoing off unseen walls. "Where are we?" I whispered, holding on to the girl for support. She looked around, her eyes wide. "Inside the film," she replied, her voice trembling. Gazing out, we could see the audience, our friends and neighbors. Looking back at us, eyes filled with horror and disbelief. I tried to shout, to warn them, but no sound came out. Suddenly, a group of doppelgangers, including our own, approached from the shadows. They moved in that unsettling, jilted manner characteristic of old silent films. "We're trapped," she murmured. "Like them." The dark-haired actor appeared, his face a mask of sorrow. "You shouldn't have touched the reel," he whispered. "Now you're part of this cursed story." I felt despair wash over me, thinking of an eternity trapped in this grainy nightmare. But then, an idea sparked. "The story," I echoed. "We need to change the ending." "But how?" the girl asked. The film world around us seemed malleable, responsive to thought and intent. I focused, imagining a scene where we confront our doppelgangers, face our fears, and retake control of the narrative. As the thought formed, the scenery began to change. We were no longer passive victims but protagonists in our own story. We stood back to back, confronting the advancing doppelgangers. Drawing from every horror film I'd ever seen, I imagined a blinding light emanating from us, pushing back the doppelgangers, forcing them to dissolve into the very film grain from which they emerged. The light grew more intense, searing the monochromatic world around us. The piano music reached a feverish climax, then started to warp and distort, until it became an unbearable cacophony. And then, just as suddenly, everything went silent. I gasped for air, finding myself back in the projection room. The ancient projector had stopped, the bizarre organic reel now nothing more than ash. The girl was beside me, equally disoriented. We stumbled out of the room and into the theater. The audience, looking confused and shaken, turned their attention to the screen, where the movie's credits began to roll. As the last name faded, the words, "The END," appeared, and the room was plunged into darkness. When the lights came up, the theater was empty, save for us and a few others. There was no sign of the doppelgangers, the cursed film, or even Mr. Hughes. As we exited the theater, the cool night air was a welcome relief. The neon marquee buzzed, the letter I still flickering intermittently. But the poster announcing the lost film screening was gone, replaced by one for an upcoming blockbuster. The girl turned to me, her glasses catching the light. "Do you think it's over?" I looked back at the theater, the weight of the night's events still pressing on me. "I hope so," I replied. "But I'm not sure I'll ever see movies the same way again." She chuckled. "You and me both." We parted ways, forever bound by the harrowing experience at the Gemini Theater. An experience that would become a whispered legend in our town, a cautionary tale of a film that should never have been screened.